Hello and welcome to what's new in Sonity 1.0.6, the big volume and debug update. Sonity is an audio middleware made in Unity, which is developed by me, Victor Engström. Also, if you want to know more about any feature, just read the tooltip or take a look at the documentation, where you can find a list of all the new features. As you can see, I've added support for Unity 6 in this version. Now we will start with looking at the new and improved volume settings. One change in Sonity is that I moved the polyphony and volume settings to this base object, so they're always available. If you have old modifier volume or polyphony settings, you can convert them to the new system with legacy conversion, convert SoundEvent modifiers volume and polyphony to base. As you can see, the modifier settings are moved to the base settings. For clarity's sake, I also removed the AudioMixerGroup from the sound container, leaving it only in the SoundEvent. If you previously used AudioMixerGroups in the sound container, you can convert these to the new system with legacy conversion, apply sound container AudioMixerGroup to SoundEvent if none. This will get the previously assigned AudioMixerGroup from the sound container and apply it to the SoundEvent if the SoundEvent AudioMixerGroup is empty. Previously in Sonity, you couldn't increase the volume, you can only decrease it. For this version of Sonity, I've added a setting in the Sound Manager, where you can enable volume increase. If you check this box and add this scripting define symbol, it increases the audio listener volume by 60 decibels, giving you additional headroom to increase the volume of Sonity sounds. So if we now look into the SoundEvent, you can see that we have an additional 24 decibels of gain here. It's the same for the sound container, where we also have an additional 24 decibels of gain. One thing that you need to keep in mind of is that if you use other non-Sonity audio sources, you need to enable ignore listener volume on them. Otherwise, their volumes will be increased by 60 decibels. So to showcase the new volume settings, let's start the scene and try them out. So we can increase the volume of the gunshot sound here. Now let's try increasing the volume of a sound container. In this version of Sonity, I also added the sound volume group. This object can be used to control the volume of multiple sound events at the same time. Just assign it to the sound event here. In the sound volume group, you can also increase the volume by an additional 12 decibels. This is very useful when mixing a large amount of sounds and you want to control their volume at the same time. Now let's take a look at the new log SoundEvent setting, which you can enable here in the Sound Manager. As you can see, it debug logs the sound events which are played, and if you click on them, you get redirected to the owner object, which is used to play the sound. Here in the log settings, you can enable and disable logging for certain events. If you enable stack trace logging script only, you can see where the sound is played in code, easily figuring out where a sound has been implemented. I've also added debug settings in the SoundEvent. Here you can select if you want to show, hide or force show the logging. You can also select if you want to show or hide the draw. You can also override the draw style, making it draw in a different color, or increasing the font size. You can also hide the drawing of sounds, hiding sounds which you might not want to see all the time. In this version of Sonity, I also added some optional editor tools. As you can see here, we can simply add the editor tools with a simple button press, which will add scripting defined symbols. When Unity has recompiled, you will now find a new Tools menu, where you will find a reference finder, select of same type, and selection history. Now let's take a look at how you can use them to speed up your workflow. First of all, they also show up in your right-click menu. And as you can notice, you also already have a predefined shortcut assigned. If we press Find References for selected assets, it will show you where the selected object is referenced in other assets. Select of same type enables you to quickly select assets of the same type. As you can see, this is already assigned to a shortcut, quickly selecting all sound containers in this folder. And we can do the same for any type of asset, enabling you to quickly select and multi-edit assets. The last editor tool is Selection History, which enables you to quickly go back and forth in your selection history. And as you can see, this has already been assigned to a shortcut. So let's say we want to browse from this object to the sound event and then to the sound container. Now if we press U, we go back in selection history. And if we press Shift U, we go forward again. This is useful for speeding up the navigation of your project. I've also added note fields for all scriptable objects in Sonity. Here you can write down any information you'd want. If you want to have some fun, you can also insert some ASCII art. I also want to show you the sound presets, which I added in Sonity 1.0.6. So if we use the automatic asset creation, they will be created with the default values. As you can see, the AudioMixerGroup field is empty and the distance scale is set to 100. So let's delete the assets and try again now with the sound preset. Let's start with enabling the example sound preset to get started. So because this has auto-match enabled, it will apply the settings of the specified sound containers and sound events to all objects which don't match any other rule. As you can see, the default sound event outputs to the SFX AudioMixerGroup. Now let's lower the default distance to 25. You can also assign different presets to different types of sounds. So here we have that if it matches the prefix SFX, it applies the SFX template settings. This also outputs to the SFX AudioMixerGroup. And let's lower the distance to 25. Now when we create the assets, it will actually not match the SFX because the prefix is not SFX but example. Instead, it will apply the default sound preset setting. You can see here which preset is applied to which object. We can see that the distance scale is 25 and that the sound event outputs to the SFX AudioMixerGroup. This saves you time by automating the setup of default values. You can also assign this with a preset menu, which is available both in the sound event and in the sound container. Another cool feature, which I added in Sonity 1.0.6, is the AudioListenerDistance override. This can be enabled in the Sound Manager. For it to work, you need to have an AudioListenerDistance component in your scene, and this component will be used to calculate the distance for the audio, instead of using the distance to the audio listener. Now the audio listener position is only used to calculate spatialization. As you can hear, the volume isn't based on the distance from the audio listener, which is placed on the camera, but rather the distance to the AudioListenerDistance object, which is placed on the red sphere. Decoupling the spatialization and distance calculation points from each other is great for example, third-person games, where you'd want the spatialization, left to right panning, etc., to be based on the rotation and location of the camera. but you'd want the volume of the sounds to be based on the distance to the player location. In that scenario, you would place an AudioListenerDistance component on the player and put an audio listener on the camera. You can also interpolate between the two positions by changing the amount in the Sound Manager. If you set it to 100%, the position is based on the location of the AudioListenerDistance component, and if you set it to 0, the location is based on the audio listener position, making it easy to find a sweet spot which fits your game. And that's all for this video. At the website sonity.org, you can find links to more tutorials and some really good documentation. You're very welcome to join the Sonity Discord. You can find links on the website.